Does anybody have any questions? Yes, please.
Do you have the dragon decks?
Dragon decks? I have not worked specifically with a dragon deck, but I have my own dragon, and I have a little bit of knowledge about dragons and I have a friend who is very dive deep into that, and so she shares with me. I just haven't come across one yet. I'm not that I wouldn't. I just haven't found one that was for me or been gifted one or been called to specifically. Do you have a dragon deck?
I do.
Nice.
It was gifted to me.
Nice, that's great. Yeah.
That's a weird thing about these cards. They just show
They
up.
do. They should. You know everything about that. Crystals, for instance. I had a necklace one time, and I went to like a music festival thing, and by the end of the day it was gone, and it was tucked under my shirt, and it was like a amethyst, and I was like, how did that happen? And I was like, I lost my necklace, and someone gave me the perspective like, well, you don't lose it, you were just done with it, and it found somebody who needed it. And so that right itself, because it's all just energy, right? And so it comes and goes as it pleases. And sometimes I'm like, I swear I had that and I don't know where it went. But just like with the decks, I had a deck that was gifted to me I was really excited about, and I just had a really hard time connecting with it. I tried. I put it out on the table. I had a couple people pull it. I was reading about it, and then I noticed that I quit putting it out on the table. And I was just holding on to it because I wasn't ready. And then I met someone, a friend's boyfriend, actually. It was the first time I was meeting him, and we started talking about tarot, and he had told me about how interested and excited he was about maybe getting into it, and he thought, maybe someday he'd be gifted. And instantly that deck popped into my head, and I was like, I have something for you. Like, yes, here you are, sir. And he loved it. He connected with it, and it was meant to get him on that journey for himself, right? So I was really just a carrier. And so I feel like with gifted decks or crystals or anything that we have, when we like in the state of abundance, we give it to someone else, and then things come back to us. And so, yes, please.
What's the next card that is what it is?
The next card right now in this moment. So this deck is, it's actually got the wolf on the front. This is another oracle deck. It's the white light oracle. This is as white and as light as it comes. And it's basically a message from your heart of hearts to your heart of hearts. And so we got 25, the theta of Venus. And again, when we look at the numbers, because again, I love to just explain to people, because the numbers go along. If the numbers didn't have some sort of meaning with the card, they wouldn't be there, right? And so when we look at the number 2 is about balance. It's about duality. When we see multiple 2s in a row, it's a sign that you're in the right place at the right time, and to just take a breath. And the number 5, again, we know is about change and transformation. And when we combine those two together, we get the number 7. And the number 7 is all about that inner alignment, that inner wisdom. I like to think about it in terms of the 7 chakras, right? When they're all firing together and we're all just like, right? That is what that is. So this is one that also comes with the book. And so let me get that up here. 24, 25. So it says, attune yourself to higher consciousness by choosing to access the purest frequencies of love within. Acknowledge lower frequencies such as judgment, fear, doubt, or shame when they arise within or around you, but do not give them a foothold in your heart. You are ready for higher understanding, to see things in a new and more positive light. Allow your inner knowing to guide you on a unique, beautiful, and highly spiritual life path. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking, because I truly love this, and when I do this, I get in such a state, like, especially afterwards. I always call it the gratitude hangover, because even if one person, like the very first time I started my business, and I got my licenses and I was official, and I had a soft opening. I called it the soft opening because it was a pop-up in someone else's shop. And I was, of course, so nervous. I was like, what if nobody comes? What if I'm doing something wrong? What if it's not right? And this woman walked in, and, she just, the look on her face, almost like she was in tears, like she was just meant to be there. right? She needed to hear what I had to say. And then, so I kind of put my mind in like a little chair and told it to calm down, have a cup of tea, right? And to relax. And I just listened to what she said, and I started doing the reading. And I had a bit of a timer at that time. And when I looked up, there was a moment all of a sudden where my mind got out of the chair and was like, do you even know what you're saying? Like, is anything you're saying mean anything? And I looked up from the cards and I looked at her face, and she was just so at peace but crying at the same time. Every single bit of that flew out of my brain, right? And I was just there to be of service. And when she left, I clutched my chest and I started crying because I felt that unconditional love. I felt spirit, the source, the universe coming through me. I felt so much gratitude and love for that moment, for this woman, and for being there in that moment, and to what an honor it was to be there of service to her, that if nobody else had showed up the rest of the day, it totally would have been worth it. It was just, and it was absolutely incredible. And so after my readings, because I do events, after that, the next week I did my grand opening where I unveiled the tent, because I have a 10 by 10 tent and curtain walls, and it's very gypsy aesthetic because I think it's fun and people love that, right? I got the costumes and the crystal ball, and I'm, having a great time, and all the decks are out, and people love that, and it draws them in. And then whoever's drawn in and comes in is meant to be there. And I'm like, okay, let's do this, right? And so, and then in addition to that, I do scheduled one-on-one sessions where I usually go up to an hour, and it's just me and that other person, which is so great because it gives us the time to really dive into things. It gives us time for them to discuss what we're looking at or have any questions or if we want to go. And so, because at events, I usually do like a 15-minute time. And so those are so great. And they'll be done and leaving, and I'll just start crying because it was just, you just feel it. It's almost overwhelming to feel such beauty, to feel such love, to be so connected to ourselves, our highest selves, our intuition, to spirit, and to understand that love that's being transmuted and sent in those messages is also for us, right? And so then it's just like, how incredibly beautiful. Dawn, yes, I've seen you with your hand up. Thank you.
Questions here,
Yeah.
Jenny.
Mhm.
So, I have decks of cards at home, and occasionally just pull them too.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't really like the answer, so I can do another one.
Yeah, I've done
How
that.
important is that? And then also, how important is it to ask a specific question, or is that important? And then last, you were gonna give us a group reading.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
but those are the questions that I had to ask about. Like, not really liking what I hear. Do I pull
Okay.
another one?
So I have done that myself, and usually when it's because we get an answer that we don't like. I think it's just like anything in life. We can keep asking, and we'll usually get the same answer because that is the answer, and we just don't want to accept it. And so then that falls back on us to be like, okay, so I didn't want to hear that, and so I'm gonna pull another card, and then I'll be like, oh, it's the same thing, and I'll be like, whatever, let it go. So, or you could try again, try a different deck, but I think being able to learn to accept the answers as they come, because I've even had it in a positive way where I've had a question and I've pulled cards to ask if I was supposed to move forward, and it all said yes, and I was like, are we sure? Like, is this really gonna work out? Like, everything is telling me, yes, go do it. And I'm like, I just don't know. But the moment that I chose to accept the answer and to get myself off the fence, basically, of keep asking and not questioning it, the moment I accepted it, everything else rolled into place and it all worked out perfectly. I was like, but I don't know if that's gonna work. And it's like, but the moment that I accepted it, I was able to open the door to allow everything to make it happen to fall into place. But that has to fall on us, right? Because we may have all this beauty of magic and these and gifts and spirit guides just waiting for us to make a specific choice or to make a decision to move forward. Then they can swoop in and be like, yeah, let's bring all this in, right? But they can't bring it to us until we're ready. And so not liking the answer really comes down to acceptance and asking yourself, why don't you like the answer? And, doing a little bit of that inner work with that. And then your other question was about
Asking how important
a
is it to
specific
ask
question.
To be more like
Right.
like focused.
So the focus, I think, is important, and it does go along with that. Be careful what you ask for thing, because you could be asking us a question in a specific way that's going to give you an answer, but if you change your perspective or change the question just a little bit, it might be like, oh, now I get it, right? Now there's more understanding with it. And so if the question you're asking and you don't feel like you're really getting an answer, ask yourself, and to open your perspective in your mind and be like, okay, so maybe ask yourself, what is a better way to ask this question even, right? And so then you're like, okay, so if I look at it from this point of view, let's see what kind of answer we get. And you're like, oh, that makes more sense. So then maybe you can ask a question that will lead to that, because then you're realizing that what you're trying to get to the core of may not be exactly how you're asking it. So you're like, I don't have an exact example right now. My mind just went blank. But so, you can ask it in that way. And other than that, sometimes you can be like, I'm going to let the question go. And you're like, I'm going to let the question go. I'm going to let my heart speak. I'm going to look at these decks and you're going to tell me what it is that I'm trying to ask, because I can't get the words out. And I've done that before. And then I'm like, which will lead me then to sometimes asking a question in a specific way, but just getting that conversation going and getting the momentum of being like, okay, so here we go, right? Like, and that just gets the ball rolling, and that can really help. And then you did bring up the group reading. I was going to do one with a few decks, but before I jump into that real quick, was there any other questions, anything else that somebody had that want, yes, ma'am.
I was curious where you believe the energy of the cards and messages comes from. Is it channeling?
I think it's a bit of, I think it's an and situation. It's not an and, well, it's not an or. It's not the cards or spirit. I think it's and. Both things can be true, right? So the decks themselves have their own energy that comes from us, because we're reading it. We're the one that's giving the intention and the magic to the cards by believing in it, and we have a connection with our intuition to our highest selves, which also incorporates us being connected to spirit as the one, as the whole, right? So I think it's an and situation. I think it's just like us co-creating our realities and our lives. We're in this together. And so I think it comes from all of it. It comes from myself. It comes from my own experiences. It comes from my intuition, my highest self, the magic that's within me, and it comes from the divine feminine energy that I know that I am deeply connected to. And so I think we're all together reading. So,
Cool.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm curious when you said that you don't have the dragon card, but you have a dragon. How did you introduce yourself to the dragon?
Actually, my friend kind of introduced me to it. She is someone who has her own, we're friends with an oracle woman from Ireland who can speak to any creature you can think of. She can basically just channel, and that creature will start coming out. And so she introduced me, and I asked her if I had one day, and because I was learning a little bit about them, and she told me what she saw in her head, the colors, and more phoenixy dragon for me in that sense. And so I for a while there I felt like I was communicating with it, and then I went through my own, I phrase it in certain ways sometimes, and I try to say it in the most positive way, and it wasn't necessarily a crisis of faith. It was just questioning everything, and which I think happens when we step out of living from our hearts and we step into our brain, because it's our brain and ego's job to basically take us from our path of living from our hearts. And so then we're like, I feel crazy. How can I be talking about how I have a dragon that's protecting me on a realm or in a dimension that's not even here now? And how crazy does that sound? And then it's like, but when you feel that and you feel that protection. And so for me personally, what's coming through for you is if you meditated and asked that specific entity, I think what's coming through for me right now with you is you have been connected and you've had messages through, you just didn't know exactly where it was coming from or that you were speaking to your dragon. And I'm seeing some yellow and red in there. So maybe if you took some time to meditate, kind of like Dawn was asking that question, or asking, being like, hey, I would love to be introduced to my dragon. I'd love to talk to it. And like my friend's dragon, for instance, she doesn't get to talk to it very much because the kind of dragon it is, they all have like different jobs, like with everything. And hers is more of a warrior dragon. So she's off fighting, like the good fights in that sense. And so when for the dragon to be able to come through that level to get to the level where she can communicate, it pulls her from that job. And but the dragon loves her so much that if she chose to have the dragon next to her and be able to communicate all the time, that dragon would leave its job to do that, but she chose to allow it to do what it's supposed to do. And so sometimes she communicates through the oracle, and so that could be it as well. But for you, at least, to get introduced, ask, just ask, because that is the beauty of all of this, is that we can just ask and be like, hey, I would love to be introduced to a dragon that I have. Like, have your deck with you if you'd like, and see what kind of answers come through, or meditate and visualize and see what gets through for you. So that is my cue. So I'm going to jump into the reading unless, of course, there's any other
I have a
questions.
quick question.
Yes.
So I have a deck, and a favorite deck that I'll pull a card every
Mhm.
morning. But I would be curious to know how you define and how you discern a yes or no. So I have a pendulum that I tend to use for if it's like
I've
a
had
yes or no.
pendulums. Yeah.
But when you pull a card, how do you what's your method of going, oh, that's a definite no?
So when I first started doing yes or no's, when I first started pulling a card in the morning, I would Google it. I would look up the representation of what that card meant, and if it was upright or downright, if it meant yes or no. Because sometimes the cards are like, yeah, if you pull this card, like the Ace of Cups upright, that's an automatic yes. And then other times it's, I don't necessarily look it up. I'll look at it and I'll just know, and I'll be like, that's a no. Even if I don't want it to be a no, my intuition will just kind of tell me what I'm feeling with that card. But if you're not getting that and you're not sure, then yeah, absolutely just Google and be like, is the 9 of Cups upright a yes? Which it is. So like
Of course.
so yeah,
the
just
internet has
it
the
helps,
answers.
it really does. Or if your deck comes with the book, sometimes the book will
Yeah.
explain it as well. And that's one of the beautiful things about the internet, is that there is that out there. And then you take that discernment and you're like, okay, so does this feel right? Because it's all about what feels best for you. No matter what it is you're looking at, whether it's the cards, if we're looking at the same deck, the most important thing is what feels and resonates with you, right? And what feels the best for you, because it's your journey, it's your magic, it's you, and connecting and being able to do it yourself. So, okay.